The fluorescent lights of the emergency room buzzed overhead, cold and indifferent. I sat there on the hospital bed, my hands trembling around the phone, trying to steady my breath as pain knifed through my abdomen. It was Christmas Eve, just after 9 p.m., and while most families were gathered around fireplaces and twinkling trees, I was alone with my 2-year-old twins, Liam and Lily, curled up in the corner with their stuffed animals. Nurse Nina hovered nearby, her hands gentle but her eyes alert. The internal bleeding had worsened, and the doctors were preparing for emergency surgery. I'd exhausted every option before making this call. Friends, neighbors, even distant cousins, no one could take the twins. I didn't want to call them. I truly didn't, but I had no choice. The phone rang only twice before my mother's face appeared on the screen, framed in festive lights and holding a champagne flute. Music played faintly in the background, Elton John's unmistakable voice echoing through their Santa Barbara home. "Don't you dare ask us to cancel our plans again," my mother snapped before I could even speak. "We've had these Elton John tickets for months." Her voice, sharp, defensive, unapologetic, cut through me more viciously than any scalpel ever could. Behind her, my father raised his eyebrows and gave a small shake of the head, already dismissing whatever I might say. My voice cracked as I tried to explain, I'm being taken into surgery. I need someone to watch the twins. Just for the night." There was a long pause, the kind that makes you forget to breathe. "You're becoming a real burden, Claire," my father said finally. "We're retired now. We deserve to enjoy our lives without constant drama." I stared at the screen, stunned into silence. These were the same parents I had been sending $2,500 every month to help cover their mortgage and living expenses. Even after Andrew died, after I'd been left to pick up the pieces alone, I kept sending the money. Out of duty, out of love. How foolish I'd been. The silence between us stretched. My mother took a sip of champagne, then turned back to the party. "Merry Christmas, Claire. Try not to be so dramatic all the time." The call ended. My hands dropped to my lap, phone still clutched tight. A hot tear slid down my cheek, splashing onto the stiff white blanket. Liam stirred in the corner, murmuring something in his sleep. Lily clutched her stuffed giraffe and looked up at me with wide, unknowing eyes. "I'll call someone," Nurse Nina said softly, placing a warm hand on my shoulder. "My friend Grace is a nanny, used to work with trauma kids. She can be here within the hour." I nodded slowly, something breaking loose inside me. Not panic, not sadness. Something colder, sharper. "Yes," I whispered. "Please call her." And in that moment, surrounded by beeping monitors and betrayal that bled deeper than any wound, I made a decision. It was time to stop being their afterthought. As the footsteps of the surgical team echoed down the hall, I closed my eyes and tried to breathe past the searing pain in my side. But the pain in my body was nothing compared to what was unraveling inside me. Memories, jagged and unwanted, began to rise like floodwater, reminders of how long I'd been surviving without ever truly being seen. In my family, I had always been the background character, the dependable one, the one who never caused trouble. Meanwhile, my younger sister Rachel was the sun around which our parents orbited. The golden child. She could do no wrong, even when she did, especially when she did. If I got an A, Rachel's B was celebrated. When I graduated magna cum laude from Oregon State, they skipped the ceremony because Rachel had landed a role in a local commercial for dish soap. A 30-second spot. That was the weekend they said I was too intense about accomplishments. When I married Andrew, they complained about the venue being too far from Santa Barbara, even though we offered to pay for their travel and hotel. "Couldn't you just do it here instead?" my mother had asked. Something simpler, more intimate. We held the wedding without them. When Liam and Lily were born, they visited once. Once. My mother said the babies were too fussy, and my father claimed his back couldn't handle the travel. But when Rachel got a new golden retriever, They drove 6 hours to help her puppy-proof her condo. I should have learned then, but I didn't, because I loved them, because I wanted them to love me back. So when they retired early and said they were struggling with the mortgage, I stepped in. Every month, without fail, I sent them money. I thought I was doing the right thing. I told myself I was being the bigger person. That maybe, just maybe, if I kept showing up for them, they'd finally show up for me. But they didn't, not even when Andrew died. The night he was killed by a drunk driver, I had to call Rachel to tell her because my parents were on a cruise and didn't answer. They didn't even come to the funeral. Said it was too last minute, and the rebooking fees were outrageous. And yet, I still kept sending the money. I increased it when inflation hit. I helped them through tax season. I paid for my mother's dental work last spring, all while working full-time as a graphic designer and raising 2 toddlers alone. Why? Because I thought that's what family did, that if I just kept giving, they'd eventually meet me halfway. But now, on Christmas Eve, as I faced the very real possibility of not waking up from surgery, and watched them prioritize Elton John over the lives of their only grandchildren, I finally saw the truth. They had never once chosen me, and I was done choosing them. Nurse Nina returned a few minutes later, her presence a small island of calm amid the chaos unraveling around me. "Grace is on her way," she said gently, checking the monitor beside my bed. She used to work in pediatric trauma at Harborview before switching to private care. "You'll like her." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. My throat was raw, not from the pain, but from holding in years of words I'd never dared say. Words like, "I'm done. I deserve better. You don't get to hurt me anymore." I watched Liam shift under his blanket, his small thumb in his mouth. Lily had fallen asleep with her stuffed giraffe tucked under her arm. They were innocent, blameless, and completely dependent on me. That thought hit harder than any diagnosis. I had no time for regret. "Nina," I said hoarsely, "can you bring me my phone again?" She nodded and retrieved it from the tray beside me. My fingers shook, but I knew what I had to do. There was no hesitation now, only a clarity that cut through the fog like a scalpel. First, I opened my banking app. One by one, I canceled every automatic transfer I'd set up for my parents. Mortgage, utilities, a supplemental account my mother used for emergency spa days. All gone. Just like that, the monthly drain that had bled my finances dry was cauterized. Next, I opened my messages. I stared at the screen for a long moment before typing. I will no longer be providing financial support. My children and I deserve better than being your afterthoughts. Please do not contact me again. I hit send. There was no dramatic music. No thunderclap. Just the quiet hum of the monitors, the distant footsteps of staff moving through the hallway, and the faint breathing of my sleeping children. But inside me, something seismic had shifted. A door that had always been cracked open, just in case they changed, just in case they came around, finally slammed shut. And I wasn't sorry. Grace arrived 20 minutes later. She had soft eyes, steady hands, and a calm warmth that immediately drew the twins in. She knelt down on their level, spoke to them with gentleness, and within minutes, Liam had handed her his favorite truck while Lily showed her the giraffe. "You're safe now," she said to me quietly as she tucked a blanket around Lily. "I've got them. You just focus on healing." For the first time in what felt like years, I let someone else take the weight off my shoulders. I surrendered. As the nurses wheeled me toward surgery, the last thing I saw was Grace sitting on the floor with my children, reading them a picture book, and as the double doors closed behind me, I felt it, not fear, not despair. Freedom. The world returned to me in pieces, flashes of light, muffled voices, the antiseptic scent of recovery. I was groggy, barely tethered to consciousness, but I could feel the dull, persistent ache in my abdomen and the tight pressure of bandages across my waist. My throat was dry, like I'd swallowed sandpaper. Somewhere nearby, the soft babble of children filtered through the haze. grounding me. I blinked against the harsh light. Grace was sitting beside my bed, her arm gently curled around Lily, who was napping against her side. Liam sat on the floor, coloring quietly with a crayon clutched in his chubby hand. Seeing them safe, happy even, was the only medicine I needed in that moment. "You're awake," Grace said, her voice soft and reassuring. "The surgery went well. You've been out for a while." I tried to speak, but only managed a rasp. She held a straw to my lips, and I sipped slowly, each swallow pulling me closer to clarity. And then I noticed it, my phone, blinking steadily on the nightstand like a distress beacon. I reached for it, fingers still numb. 27 missed calls, 18 voicemails, 39 text messages. My heart clenched, a small flicker of irrational hope flaring up before I could stop it. Maybe they'd realized how serious this was. Maybe they'd finally cared. I opened the first message. "Your silence is extremely disrespectful, Claire. We needed to discuss January's transfer. Next, this is unbelievable. You know we've planned this Napa trip for weeks. Then, we had to dip into our savings because of your impulsive behavior. Very selfish. Not one. Asked how the surgery had gone, if I was alive, if the twins were okay. Nothing but rage over the money, the disruption to their vacation plans, and the sudden absence of my financial tether. And the voicemails? Worse. You think you're the only one going through hard times? We raised you, and this is the thanks we get? I'm warning you, Claire. If you don't fix this, there will be consequences." I dropped the phone into my lap, while rising in my throat. I wasn't sure if it was the medication, the pain, or just the pure weight of their words pressing down on me. I turned my face to the window, blinking hard. Then a new message appeared, this one from Rachel. "Claire, Mom and Dad just told me you were having some minor outpatient procedure. What's going on? They're freaking out about money and acting like you vanished. Are you okay?" A hollow laugh escaped me, more breath than sound. So they'd lied to her, too. Of course they had. Still groggy, I typed slowly, thumbs trembling. "Emergency surgery. Internal bleeding. Doctors said I might not survive. I begged them to come. They chose their concert." There was a pause, then her reply. "Oh my God. Claire, I had no idea. I would have taken the kids. I'm so sorry. I should have asked more questions. I just believed them." I stared at her words. For a long time, Rachel had been the mirror that reflected our parents' narrative. Polished, curated, false. But now, maybe for the first time, she was starting to see the cracks. Maybe I wasn't alone after all. It was 2 days after the surgery when Rachel showed up at the hospital. She looked pale, eyes ringed with fatigue, holding a container of homemade soup in one hand and a bouquet of sunflowers in the other. "I know you're probably not ready to see me," she said softly, standing awkwardly in the doorway. "But I wanted to. I needed to come." I didn't speak right away. I just watched her, unsure. This was the same sister who had grown up in the golden spotlight of our parents' love. The same sister who, whether she realized it or not, had benefited from my silence for decades. But something about her posture was different now. Smaller, humbled. She stepped inside, placed the soup on the table, and sat near the edge of the chair like she didn't deserve to take up space. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice cracking. "About everything. I believed them. I didn't even ask. I just thought you were being dramatic again." Her honesty stung, but it also rang true. I nodded. "They taught us that I was the difficult one." Rachel looked down, twisting a ring around her finger. "When you told me what really happened, I couldn't stop thinking about it. So I went to check on them, to see for myself." She exhaled shakily. "Claire, I think they're in trouble. Real trouble." I raised an eyebrow. "Trouble like what?" "They said they were worried about the mortgage, right?" She reached into her purse and pulled out a folder, sliding it across my lap. "Well, I found this in Mom's desk drawer. It's a loan agreement. From last year. taken out against the house to buy the boat. I froze. Wait, a second mortgage. Rachel nodded. And here's the kicker. They used you as a guarantor. What? My voice was barely a whisper. She pointed to the bottom of the page. Your name, your social security number, forged signature. My stomach churned. I flipped the page, my hands cold despite the fevered heat pulsing from the incision in my abdomen. It was there, clear as day. My name, my information. I had never seen this document in my life. I looked up at her, stunned. They stole my identity. Rachel hesitated. Technically, yes. Or they assumed you'd never notice. They figured as long as the payments kept coming, no one would ever ask questions. A strange calm settled over me, like ice forming over a fire that had raged too long. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was fraud. How much? I asked quietly. 128,000, she whispered, plus interest. I let the number settle in the air like ash. That boat, the one they'd always insisted was a modest reward for a life of sacrifice, had been funded with stolen credit and borrowed time. And they had bet it all on me, never finding out. I had thought cutting them off financially was a boundary. But now it was self-defense. They showed up unannounced 3 days after I got home from the hospital. I was still moving slowly, each step a careful negotiation with the pain that lingered beneath my stitches. Grace had just left with the twins, taking them to the park for a few hours so I could rest. The apartment was quiet, sun filtering through the blinds, when I heard the knock. Not tentative, not gentle, insistent. I froze. Part of me already knew who it was. I peeked through the peephole and felt my pulse spike. My parents. My mother stood clutching her designer tote, a too bright shade of lipstick smudged across her mouth. My father beside her, arms crossed, jaw tight, that familiar expression of controlled annoyance etched into every line of his face. They looked exactly the same, but something in me had changed. I cracked the door just enough to be heard. What do you want? My mother stepped forward, her smile too wide. Claire, darling, we've been so worried. You haven't answered our calls. We needed to make sure you and the children were all right, my father added, his voice cool and practiced. I didn't respond. I just stared at them, waiting. The mask slipped first from my father. We also need to talk about this ridiculous financial situation. There it was, the real reason. I said nothing. The bank called about our mortgage, he continued. We had to dip into our cruise savings to cover the payment this month. I raised an eyebrow. Your cruise savings? He flinched just slightly. My mother jumped in. Claire, please, let's not turn this into a scene. We came here to resolve things. We've depended on that money for years. That's not my problem, I said, voice flat. Not anymore. But, sweetie, she pleaded, her tone rising with desperation, we built our lives around your support. Your father and I. My commitment, I interrupted, was out of guilt, not obligation, and certainly not love returned. My father stepped forward, his voice sharpening. You're overreacting. We had plans. We didn't know it was that serious. You mean the emergency surgery I begged you to help me prepare for? I asked, eyes locking with his. The one where the doctors said I might not survive? You chose Elton John. My mother's face twisted. We made one mistake. No, I said, steady now. You made a lifetime of choices. That night was just the one that finally revealed the truth. We're your parents, my father snapped, his voice booming with entitlement. And I'm a parent, too, I answered, my voice low but resolute. I would never treat Liam and Lily the way you've treated me. Just then, the door behind me creaked open. Emily stepped out from the hallway, clutching her stuffed giraffe. Her curls were still messy from her nap, her eyes wide and unsure. My mother gasped theatrically and bent down, arms outstretched. There's my precious girl. Grandma brought presents. But Emily didn't move. She shrank back, clutching my leg, her small hands gripping tighter. She doesn't know you, I said softly. My mother straightened slowly, the rejection slicing through her mask. I think you should leave, I continued. If I'm ever ready to talk, I'll reach out. But the money, you can't just cut us off like this, my father snapped. We sacrificed for you. I looked him dead in the eye. You didn't sacrifice. You collected. And now the account is closed. Then I shut the door, gently, firmly, like the ending of a chapter one never intended to reread. The email arrived 2 mornings later. It came from my father's address, but was addressed to everyone, extended family, old friends, even distant cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. The subject line was plain, a family matter. I knew what it was before I opened it. Still, reading it sent a fresh wave of heat through my chest. It was long, wordy, masterfully manipulative, a blend of passive-aggressive guilt and self-pity. He wrote about how they had dedicated their lives to raising 2 daughters, how they had supported me through my darkest times, and how I had, without warning or explanation, cut them off financially and emotionally. Not once did he mention the emergency surgery. Not once did he mention the twins. He painted me as ungrateful, unstable, a vindictive daughter punishing her parents for imagined wrongs. My mother even added a paragraph about how they had canceled a holiday trip out of grief for my behavior, implying they had sacrificed something for me when in fact they'd done the exact opposite. And it worked. Within hours, my phone buzzed with messages from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Claire, is everything okay? Your parents are devastated. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. You've always been so level-headed. Talk to them. They've been so generous over the years. Maybe you're just overwhelmed with grief? It would have broken me once. Not anymore. I didn't rage. I didn't write a 6-paragraph rebuttal. I didn't call anyone crying. I simply opened my laptop, clicked reply all, and typed 1 sentence. I recently underwent emergency surgery with a significant risk of complications. My parents refused to watch my children during this time because they had concert tickets. I am now focusing on my recovery and caring for my twins without additional stress. Then I hit send. That was it. No defense. No drama. Just the truth. And the silence that followed was louder than anything my father had written. By evening, the tide had turned. First came my cousin Ben. Wait, what? They didn't even check on you after surgery? Then his wife. Didn't they just post pictures on a boat last month? I thought they were broke. By the end of the day, I'd received a dozen private messages from aunts, cousins, even my father's sister, all expressing disbelief, concern, and quiet outrage. No one said it out loud, but I could hear it between the lines. We see you now. The most unexpected message came from Aunt Linda, my mother's older sister, the self-proclaimed peacemaker. I had no idea what really happened, Claire. They told me you were being dramatic after a minor checkup. I'm sorry I didn't reach out sooner. But the most meaningful response came from Rachel. She called me, her voice trembling. They lied to everyone, she said. They're still lying. But I know the truth now. And I'm with you. Whatever you need, I'm here. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. For the first time, I wasn't defending myself. I was simply standing. It started small. A casserole left at my doorstep by a neighbor I barely knew. A hand-me-down double stroller from someone in my support group. A message from one of my design clients saying, "Take all the time you need. We're not going anywhere." Then it grew. Ava, the widowed mother I'd met through the online grief group, began checking in daily. We'd message in the late hours when sleep refused to come, trading stories about our kids, our late husbands, and the strange, impossible loneliness of becoming a single parent overnight. She was the one who planted the first seed of possibility. "Have you ever thought about moving?" she asked one night. "Your apartment's too small. You could sell it and use the equity somewhere quieter, somewhere with better childcare options, maybe even a yard." I hadn't, but once she said it, I couldn't stop thinking about it. It felt dangerous at first. Hope always did. Still, I began to look. Just a little. One listing here, one budget calculator there. Then Ava, who worked in real estate, sent me a link to a modest 3-bedroom cottage in a quiet suburb outside Tacoma. It had peeling paint and an outdated kitchen, but the yard was fenced and the neighborhood had a preschool with a trauma-informed teaching team. And the mortgage? Lower than my rent had ever been. I called the bank the next day. Within a month, I had a new address and a new beginning. I moved in with Liam and Lily on a rainy Friday morning. Grace helped carry boxes. Rachel showed up with groceries and toddler snacks. Ava brought a bouquet of wildflowers and her little boy, who immediately bonded with Liam over trucks and dandelions. My old life, cramped, exhausted, borrowed, was gone. In its place was something different, something mine. The side business I'd started almost accidentally, building memorial websites, was gaining momentum. A few of the women from my grief group had commissioned me to make pages for their spouses. Then their friends reached out. Then strangers. It wasn't glamorous, but it mattered. It let me use my skills to create something meaningful. 3 days a week, Grace still came by to help with the twins. I rearranged my client meetings around their nap schedules. We had backyard picnics on Sundays and dance parties in the living room. I let them finger paint on the walls of the nursery before I repainted them in soft lavender. And slowly, the air around me began to change. It wasn't just peace. It was absence, the absence of dread, of tension, of walking on eggshells with every phone call and holiday. For the first time, I could hear my own thoughts without the static of guilt. And in that silence, I realized something I'd never dared believe before. I was allowed to be happy, even if they never approved, even if they never came back. It was a Thursday afternoon when they came back. I was folding laundry in the living room, the twins napping peacefully in their new bedroom, the house filled with the comforting hum of nothingness. I almost didn't hear the knock, but when I opened the door, I knew. There they stood, my parents, once again on my doorstep. Except this time, there was no designer tote or champagne glow. My mother looked older, paler. My father wasn't wearing his usual golf shirt, but a wrinkled windbreaker. And in his hands was a manila folder, thick and creased. "Can we talk?" he said, voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. I hesitated. Then, slowly, I stepped aside. We sat at the small dining table I'd bought secondhand from a moving sale. It had a chip on one leg and a child's crayon mark that wouldn't scrub off. But it was mine, like everything in this new life. My father opened the folder and slid it across to me. "We need $144,000, he said, "to catch up on the mortgage and avoid foreclosure." I stared at the numbers. Rows of debt, overdue notices, late fees. Lines highlighted in yellow. Red underlines. Panic formatted in Excel. I didn't touch it. "What about selling the boat?" I asked calmly. "We'd take a loss," he said, as if that answered anything. "And the timeshare?" My mother sighed. "We've tried, but the market's terrible. Besides, those were supposed to be our retirement luxuries." I looked at her. "Luxuries you can afford." My father bristled. "We could afford them with your help." There it was. Again. The expectation that my labor, my life, my body, post-surgery, post-widowhood, should remain their safety net. "It's the least you could do," he added, "after everything we've done for you." I tilted my head, studying him like a stranger. "What exactly," I asked softly, "have you done for me?" They didn't answer, and maybe that was the answer. Just then, the twins came padding into the room, sleepy and tousled, their little feet slapping against the floor. Liam held his favorite truck. Lily clutched her giraffe. They blinked up at my parents, confusion plain on their faces. "There are our precious babies," my mother cooed, standing to reach for them. But neither child moved. Lily stepped behind my chair. Liam looked down at his truck. "They don't know you," I said gently. "You've seen them 3 times in their lives. You chose not to be involved. My father's face hardened. That's not fair. We're busy people. Too busy to help during emergency surgery, I said. Too busy to be grandparents. But not too busy to ask for $144,000. My mother's lip trembled. I couldn't tell if it was grief or performance. If we don't get help, she whispered, we'll lose everything. I nodded slowly. I lost my husband. My voice didn't shake. My children lost their father. I had to sell my furniture, work through grief, have my insides stitched back together while learning how to breathe again. And we survived. I stood. You will too. They didn't fight. They just gathered the folder and left, the silence trailing behind them like the scent of something that had finally died. 3 months passed. The calls stopped. The emails faded. The silence, once foreign and jagged, settled into something steady, almost peaceful. Rachel visited every week, bringing fresh fruit, puzzles for the twins, and stories from the family I no longer felt tethered to. One afternoon, as she sat on the back porch sipping tea, she said it without preamble. They sold the house. I didn't flinch. They were behind on payments for too long. The bank gave them 60 days. They couldn't catch up. I looked out at Liam and Lily playing in the yard, their laughter light and careless under the spring sky. They moved into a condo outside Oxnard. It's small. No view. No boat. No trips planned. She didn't say it with malice. Just fact. They're still telling people you abandoned them, she added softly, that you promised to support them forever and then suddenly stopped. I didn't sigh. I didn't get angry. I just said what I knew to be true. Let them talk. Because I had no interest in rewriting their version of the story. I'd already written my own. That night, after the twins had gone to sleep and the world had gone quiet, I found an envelope in the mailbox. Handwritten. No return address, but I recognized the looping script instantly. It was from my mother. I stared at it for a long time. Then, curiosity, a gentle tug, nudged me to open it. Inside was something I'd never seen before. Not a plea. Not a guilt trip. Not a demand. An apology. I've had time to reflect on my behavior, she wrote. Watching you build a life without us has forced me to confront things I didn't want to see. I resented your strength. I called it coldness. I envied your independence and labeled it distance. I see now how we failed you, not just once, but for years. When you needed us the most, we chose ourselves, and I will live with that. She didn't ask for money. She didn't even ask for forgiveness. She just asked that I read it. Rachel confirmed later that both our parents had started attending family therapy, that my father, after a mild heart scare, had begun taking things slower. He'd even taken a part-time job at a hardware store. They had sold the boat at a loss, let go of the timeshare, adjusted their lifestyle to something more real. They're not perfect, she said, but I think they're finally starting to see themselves. I didn't respond right away. I wasn't ready, but I held the letter in my hands for a long time, longer than I expected, not because I needed their apology to heal, but because I finally didn't. Healing hadn't come from their remorse. It came from my refusal to keep bleeding just to keep them comfortable. 1 year after the surgery, I agreed to meet them at a quiet cafe on neutral ground. I arrived early, not out of nervousness, but out of habit. I ordered tea and brought no expectations. They walked in together, and they looked smaller than I remembered. Not just older, but quieter, slower. Their clothes were simple, their movements careful. There was no perfume, no posture, no performance. We didn't embrace. We just sat. The silence was awkward, then fragile. Then my father did something I'd never seen him do in all my life. He cried. I was a terrible father, he said, voice cracked and trembling. And a worse grandfather. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want you to know that I see it now. My mother reached out, not to touch me, but to gesture, slowly, toward my hands folded in my lap. We've spent months unlearning everything we thought we knew, she said. It's hard. It's slow. But we're doing it. I didn't promise anything. I didn't offer absolution. Instead, I pulled out my phone and showed them pictures. Liam finger painting on the back porch. Lily asleep with her giraffe. Our tiny garden blooming with sunflowers. Grace pushing the twins on a swing. A cake we baked together. A life we built from the ruins. They looked, and, for once, they didn't interrupt. As we stood to leave, my father asked quietly, "Do you think someday we might be able to know our grandchildren?" I didn't answer right away. I wanted the weight of my words to settle. "That depends on your actions," I said gently, "not your words." I paused. If you truly want to be part of their lives, it starts by respecting the person raising them. He nodded, and for the first time, I believed he understood what that meant. As I walked away, the wind lifted soft petals from the trees above. I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel vengeance. Just calm, because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclamation, and I had reclaimed everything they once tried to take. My strength, my peace, and the quiet certainty that I would never again let someone else decide my worth.